Okay, we're going to get started. Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us. I'm Tom Adams. I am a strategic policy advisor to the Ocean Project, and it's great to have everyone again today on our webinar. And we always like to thank the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation for the support which enables this webinar series. A couple quick announcements. A recording of this webinar and a PDF file containing the slides will be posted on the Ocean Project website under the Visitor Engagement tab, and it can be found by clicking the initiatives link on the homepage. And then for questions or comments during the webinar, please either use the question and answer tab or the chat tab on the toolbar. We try to keep these webinars as close to 30 minutes as possible. That's our goal today, but we may go a little bit over, and we apologize for that. And our next webinar will be on April 3rd, same time, and we'll be discussing the 30 for 30 campaign for nature, which in 30 years seeks to protect 30% of the Earth's land and water resources, and we are still waiting to confirm speakers. And then finally, at the very end of the last slide of the presentation, we'll have contact information for all of the speakers. There'll be introduction slides that have that as well. If you miss it, just hang on to the end and I'll leave that slide up for a little bit. So with that, let's get started. Just a quick rundown of what we're going to do today. I'll give a brief 5-minute update on what's going on in Beltway and in the presidential campaign, outline some important dates coming up and events. Douglas Meyer, my colleague at the Ocean Project, will then talk about our visitor engagement projects and a toolkit that's resulted from it. And it's great to have Kim McIntyre from the Aquarium Conservation Partnership with us again. She will get into a Forage Fish Conservation Act campaign that is using a lot of the strategies and tools that we developed in our visitor engagement project. So, okay, so real quickly, the coronavirus, has taken over a lot of what's going on in this town. This morning, the president signed the $8.3 billion funding bill to respond to it. The state of the federal response is, I would say, there's a lot of market watching going on. They seem to be very concerned about the economy and trying to make sure that stays, the stock market stays up and the economy stays stable. And that is conflicting with getting information out, as we've seen if you watch the news. So there's a great need for education. I think that's lacking in the federal response, unlike previous ones in the past that are under Democratic and Republican administrations. So the picture on the right, the bottom one, is from a hearing yesterday where the Smithsonian Institution had one of their scientists testifying in the House of Representatives on zoonotic diseases. And it made me think of my time with Brookfield Zoo, where we were getting some federal funding to do research on that. And this really creates, if you've got the expertise on site, a really good media and public education opportunity to, either through media relations or just the messages that you disseminate to the people who are visiting about steps that they can take, threats to do. The more information, the better we're going to be. So on to the presidential campaign. Obviously, President Trump will be the Republican nominee. This week, it looks like it has, it doesn't look like it. It has narrowed down to 2. The one thing I'd say is Vice President Biden right now is in very strong position in the way, without getting into the nuts and bolts of it, that there are no winner-take-all states. So the delegates are apportioned based on vote totals. He's winning big in some states, and Senator Sanders' wins have been more narrow, so the delegates are more equally distributed. Right now, it's hard to see the former vice president losing his advantage unless it's a self-inflicted wound. One thing I'd say is the next couple of weeks, we've got some important primaries. Michigan is one to watch. Senator Sanders won it narrowly last year. That result will not help him. We also have southern states, Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, and Florida, which have similar dynamics to where the vice president has really run up the vote with African-American voters and suburban women. That's actually worked in some of the non-southern states. And I think by all intents, it may be done now, but I think after March 17th, particularly with Florida and Ohio on the ballot, it really, for all intents and purposes, could be over, and the vice president would have an insurmountable lead. All of this means you start thinking about the general election coming up, and I think it's pretty certain that white men need not apply for the vice president position. More than likely, I think both of these guys will put a woman on the ticket with them, and whether she's a person of color remains to be seen, but I think that's a foregone conclusion. Okay, so we've talked the last couple times about administrative rollbacks and initiatives on landmark conservation laws. What we've got going on now is those are still in play, and there's public comment period out, particularly on the National Environmental Policy Act. But several media outlets in the last couple of weeks have had freedom of information requests granted. They've received information, and what we're seeing across the board, and this goes back to the coronavirus a little bit, really a suppression of science when it's inconvenient to the position the administration wants to take. The latest one today came out about the right whale and the desire to open up the Atlantic to more oil and gas drilling, where they've been doing sonic boom testing to find the resources. The administration, the political people in the administration had ordered the science out of it. And, you know, I think just to back up to coronavirus real quickly, you're going to see that tension really play out. The vice president, who's in charge of the task force, wants all public communications being cleared by his office. And you already see some of the scientists involved really flaunting that. And we'll see. I just think it's a matter of time before someone gets thrown under the bus on that. So back on track here. Right now, the Senate has a bill on the floor, an energy bill, which is really geared more towards new technologies, research and development. But it's one of the few times a piece of legislation has gotten to the floor in the Senate this entire Congress. So everybody who wants to try to do an amendment to the bill has got them going on. And there's one that popped up to repeal or roll back the Antiquities Act, which is another landmark bill. There may be some ones we would like, but it's going to be the better part of some long days and nights on the Senate floor, suffice it to say, to work through this bill and have it come out to something that I think the House would even take up and pass. Okay, the last thing here is, and we'll get into this a little bit more later in the webinar, and we've teased this a little bit in the last couple of webinars, is a sign-on letter for the Forage Fish Conservation Act. And we'll get into the details of what that act does. The Ocean Project is working on this with the Aquarium Conservation Partnership. And we will be sending out a letter either today or Monday, the draft of it, for consideration. If you want to make sure your institution, receives it, please go to the chat box and leave your name and contact information, and we'll make sure you're on the mailing list for it out. So we do this every presentation, and you can see the mid-year for AZA is coming up. I have not heard, and before you make plans, you may want to check with them, because conferences are being, a lot of organizations are canceling conferences and meetings. I don't know if that's under consideration there, but I want to highlight these four, which we've focused on the last couple of webinars. These are great opportunities to engage the public, meet with decision makers, and these dates, April to say July 4th, are really critical because it's when members of Congress, elected officials, are really beginning to pay attention to what they're hearing from their people, because they're going to want to be able to talk to that in the campaign. So I encourage everybody to come to DC when they can, or come on those days, and really think about the messages you're conveying and how they're going to play to decision makers when you're doing events like Earth Day in April, World Oceans Day, and others you have planned. Okay, so I want to turn it over now to my colleague, Douglas Meyer. I'll briefly introduce him before I do that. Douglas, since 2005, has played a key role with the Ocean Project's strategic communications, including market research analysis, and working with our partners to help them integrate and evaluate those insights as applied to their own priorities and programs. And you'll get a sense of that in his presentation of how he works with that. He has a long track record of working with conservation organizations, both as a consultant and as an employee, where he was on staff at the Nature Conservancy. He's also worked with Wildlife Conservation Society, Defenders of Wildlife, Resources for the Future, World Wildlife Fund, and others. And then I have to say that in spite of being a sad sight as a surfer, he still loves going to the beach with his wife and daughters. So he has that going for him. Douglas, the floor is yours. Let me know when you want me to flip the slides.
Thanks, Tom. And you can go ahead and flip the slide because it'll definitely be an improvement off that photo. I feel very old after that introduction. But thanks, everyone, and appreciate the opportunity to chat with you and explain some of the work that we've been doing with, of course, acknowledgement, as we'll come to in a second, because I know there's going to be a few friends on the call who helped really pull this together. It really was a team effort. At the Ocean Project, as mentioned on this slide, we've been really, after doing years of public opinion research, we really wanted to look at how do we max out the opportunity that we have, or especially that you have as zoos and aquariums, as trusted leaders on conservation issues, and where's the biggest return on investment in terms of affecting change at scale by engaging the public. And we really started to look at this opportunity with public policy. We had a chance, thanks to the support of the Gordon Betty Moore Foundation, to look at the idea of working to bring people in to fisheries policy, and to really look at how do we do that in a way that achieves the goals you see on this slide. We wanted to raise their awareness of the issues, not just seafood, but really fisheries issues overall. We wanted to document, do they care about it? Are they with us on this? Because what we've learned is if we could document that support, that gives you great standing in going to meet with policy leaders. The secondary goals, we want to make sure that as we're talking, or as the different aquariums and zoos, we're talking to the visitors, that we're actually increasing and enhancing the perceptions of the organizations and the quality of the visitor experience. So Tom, if you go to the next slide there. So these are the partners. I wanted to just, again, it really is a collaboration, and we view ourselves as kind of coordinating from below. So if you go to the next slide, Tom, thanks to everybody there. The idea is we wanted to come up with a way to ensure there has to be cohesion in these efforts, because if as a community we're going to have an impact, there has to be enough commonality that we're all talking about the same things. But at the same time, we know that every institution is different. Every zoo and aquarium has a little bit of a different layout, a little bit of a different vibe, if you will. And so we wanted to be accommodating of that as well. So together we've came up with a common story framework that very much aligns. The little logo you see up in the upper right-hand corner is Heartwired to the Ocean, which is a great report underwritten by the Packard Foundation that talks about effective communication around ocean issues. We very much align with one of their frameworks. So it really followed what you see up here. And then the last is really having an ask, which is one of, in this case, signing a card, a comment card to Congress. So in every case, at Mystic Aquarium, shown down in the bottom of your screen, they showed a PSA. At Florida Aquarium, they talked in front of one of their key species. And in Seattle Aquarium, they got really innovative and tried delivering the messaging in their cafe. Next, please. To evaluate the effort, we also wanted to make sure we had comment evaluation. We tracked response rates for the comment cards, which was phenomenal. We had an average of 23% of people who were asked to sign a comment card. We've been playing with this for a while in 3 different experiment phases now. And what we've basically seen is if you have a comment card sitting on a table, you'll get a lower rate. If you have it up on a wall where people can see each other signing, you can get about 12 to 15% will sign a card. If you actually have a personal touch where you're handing somebody a card, you can go to as high as 50%. Given the numbers of visitors we have, that means in a weekend, it's foreseeable to collect 1,500 comment cards in a weekend. And in the case of Mystic and New England Aquarium, they were able to track those by zip code and show they had a great representation of the country. We collected also 2,500 randomly sampled exit surveys. The good news for those on this call, we've done so much surveying that we can have a really high degree of confidence in what we're saying about how visitors responded to this. We also collected qualitative staff feedback because we knew that for the folks actually on the floor doing the engagement, it had to work for them as well. Next slide, Tom. So the results were really strong in that, again, we can do this. Visitors, we didn't get, we were told, oh gosh, people are not gonna wanna talk about signing a card to Congress. In fact, we had about 1 in 4 doing that, again, with a personal touch if they were handed a card by a staff member, as high as 50%. We just did another experiment when New England Aquarium saw that go to 60%. Visitors consistently, again, when we did those exit surveys, we compared our group that said, yes, I had been spoken to and asked to sign a card versus the group that said, no, I did not have that as part of my experience today. The yes group consistently and really with a high degree of confidence, we can say, expressed higher awareness and support for the issues, along with this greater sense that their actions matter. They really felt, we asked if they felt their actions would make a difference for the ocean. The group that had been spoken to had a higher level of agreement on that. They also consistently expressed more recognition and appreciation for aquariums as conservation leaders. And for those who are familiar with Net Promoter Scores, we knew a lot of our partners use Net Promoter Scores. We wanted to make sure, and we actually saw, we'll say, a correlation at this point between those who are asked reporting that they had a better experience in terms of more likely to recommend a visit to a friend. Let me go to the next slide, Tom. And also, and this is really important, when people took the cards, and New England and Mystic really led the charge here, and I know Virginia Aquarium, I believe I saw Mark Swingle's name on the call, but people are talking about bringing them with them to their fly-in day that Tom alluded to. It gives you real standing to go in with a stack of cards. There's even some more creative ways that Kim will talk about than just a standard postcard. But it gives you standing when you go talk to members of Congress to say, look, I'm here reflecting what your constituents have to say about this issue, and they care about it. And then we got really nice feedback and some nice suggestions too from staff as to how to keep making this better. All of this is now summarized. It's on a blog post on our website, which that link is there. Maybe we can throw that link in the chat too. And just remember, this was all out of nothing more than a 2-minute engagement. And in fact, what we're learning is, 90 seconds to 2 minutes is enough to make a difference. So Kim will talk about small fish, big impact. This is small engagement, big impact. Next slide, Tom. Our recommendations are, we now have a very good recipe that can be adapted and used. And in fact, Katie Cabina from Mystic Aquarium, who was part of this project, has now been really, I think, Kim, correct me later if this is incorrect, but has really been leading the charge in developing the good work that now the Aquarium Conservation Partnership is doing around forage fish. Some of the key recommendations that you'll find in that guide are, we really see a great opportunity with larger group gatherings, so talks, presentations. It really is important to develop and stick to a script to make sure you're hitting all of the points. Collecting those comment cards and getting people's zip codes, because that directly relates. If it's a Senate issue, you at least want their state. If it's a House issue, you would like to have their zip codes, so you know which district. The creative options, again, I really liked. I've had a little bit of a sneak peek at what some of the ACP members are doing. And I won't steal the thunder there, but there's creative ways you can add a little spice to the idea of a comment card. And that there are also some new innovations that we wanted to try with on-site engagements, and ACP is really picking up the charge there. The last thing is, it's a lot of time and effort to collect 2,500 exit surveys. And we're doing another round now to look at how the messaging framework plays out across diverse audiences. The good news is, because we've done so many of this, you don't need to do as much. So with that, there's a really great opportunity that Kim's going to talk about, where a lot of this framework that we've developed with the 6 partners is now going to be applied to the Forage Fish Conservation Campaign. So with that, I'll pass it over to Kim.
Well, before you do that, I want to say, introduce Kim, but I just want to make an observation as a former congressional staffer. Zoos and aquariums really don't show up much on Capitol Hill, so engaging their visitors and communicating that interest is sort of an oh wow moment for staffers. You're already known in the offices because of your reputations and your role in the community, but you're a unique voice and one that's constituents. Unlike, you know, I'm also a former lobbyist for conservation groups, unlike a DC-based lobbyist. So as Douglas said, big impact, little engagement. So before I turn it over to Kim, for those who don't know her, she's the director of the Aquarium Conservation Partnership, a voluntary initiative launched in 2016 to increase the collective conservation impact of aquariums. ACP promotes collaboration among member aquariums to achieve ocean and freshwater conservation goals, and they are 20+ members, many of whom are on this webinar. She is a trained scientist, undergraduate degrees, master's degrees, and also an environmental law degree. She really can do it all. So Kim, I will turn it over to you. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much, Tom and Douglas. Today, I am going to talk a little bit about the Forage Fish campaign that the Aquarium Conservation Partnership is launching. And of course, this is in partnership with many of our aquariums that Douglas and Tom were just talking about, and really led by Mystic Aquarium, who has been a part of the Ocean Project's fishery engagement projects, learned a lot from those, and we're applying them towards this campaign. Next slide, and it might be animated, I'm sorry if it is. My 13-year-old daughter made me put animations in my PowerPoint, so.
I may have taken it.
Good. Okay, so as many of you know, forage fish are a critical link in marine food webs and ocean wildlife that all of our aquarium and zoos care about and our audiences care about depend on forage fish for survival. So what you see here is one of the infographics that we have developed for our campaign to show the linkage between the higher predators, forage fish, and the plankton, and just that connection with the food chain. Next slide. We also know that forage fish face many threats, including overharvesting, climate change, ocean acidification, and habitat loss and degradation. Next slide. And we also know that ecosystem-based fishery management works, and that forage fish are an integral part of that fishery management, promoting healthy ocean ecosystems, as you can see here. Next slide. So that's just a very quick overview. Usually Dr. Oster from Mystic Aquarium gives the science behind it, which even though I have an undergraduate degree in marine biology, I'm not qualified to really go into. So one of ACP's goals is to improve the sustainability of fisheries. And together with the Ocean Project, we have submitted multiple letters to the administration and to members of Congress supporting a strong reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Fisheries Management Act, which is really the landmark piece of legislation that manages our fisheries. Here is a screenshot of one of those letters that we jointly submitted. We had over 35 zoos and aquariums join. So that's been a great partnership in moving this this message forward on the Hill. Next slide. So now I'm just going to give a little brief overview of the Forage Fish Conservation Act. I believe the Ocean Project has done another webinar on this. So this act is what this campaign is developed around. So right now there is a House bill, HR 2236, that is in play, and we are still looking for a Senate co-sponsor right now. Senator Blumenthal from Connecticut, you can see pictured here at Mystic Aquarium, is one of the co-sponsors of the Senate version of the bill. And we're really looking for, jointly with the Ocean Project and with many other partners, including National Audubon Society, are looking for a key Republican co-sponsor so we can get the Senate version introduced. Next slide. So what is the Forage Fish Conservation Act? What does it do? As you can see here, it provides a national definition for forage fish, which is not currently defined in the Magnuson-Stevens Act. It limits new directed fisheries on currently unmanaged forage fish species until the impact on existing fisheries is assessed. It directs fishery managers to account for predator needs in their existing management plans for forage fish. It specifies that fishery management councils consider forage fish when establishing priorities, and it ensures the scientific advice that fishery managers seek include forage fish recommendation. So the intent of this act is to really, I think it's, and Tom can probably talk more about the mechanics behind it, but it's really meant to become part of the reauthorization of the Magnuson-Stevens Act. So right now it's a standalone bill, but will probably be incorporated into that reauthorization.
Let me just add, Kim,
yes, please add.
if a larger Magnuson-Stevens bill moves, yes, this gets attached as an amendment. If it doesn't, like I can't remember the name of the bill last year, like the Freedom to Fish Act or something like that, it could move freestanding on its own. So that's why it's important to get behind it. Okay, are you ready for the next slide?
Yes, and thank you for that clarification. So ACP has put some resources into a joint campaign. In the past, we've done a couple larger campaigns specifically on the reduction of single-use plastic. And so now we've put together some assets for our members to include graphics, social media toolkits, visitor engagement toolkits, which are based a lot on the research done and the projects done by the Ocean Project, and video PSA, which hopefully we'll play at the end. Next slide. So we have two goals of the Forage Fish campaign. One is, and firstly, is to raise awareness on the importance of forage fish species and their conservation. It's not, forage fish is kind of a new term to many people. So it's about educating people on what forage fish are and the fact that not only can we see them in our aquariums, but we also rely on them to feed many of the animals in our aquariums, in addition, of course, to the environmental importance of them. And of course, then there's also the call to action and the goal to support passage of the Forage Fish Conservation Act. Next slide. So as I said, we've developed 3 different components for our campaign. One is aquarium action to support the passage of the Forage Fish Conservation Act, and that's really in the form of the letter that Tom mentioned at the beginning, which will be shared broadly, and support for aquariums to reach out to their representatives to support the Forage Fish Conservation Act. Another is with graphic design, we will educate and activate online audiences via social media to take action. And then thirdly, we've developed a toolkit so aquariums can engage their visitors on site to take action. Okay, next slide. No, I only have a couple more minutes. So here's an example of some social media assets that we have developed. There are a number of infographics. In addition, we have photos that are available. We have social media copy, we have logos and all that. And we're also using the hashtag #SmallFishBigImpact. Next slide. For the first time, our members are going to try out this tool called New Mode. And so this is where you have a call to action to your audiences to use their voice to speak up on behalf of forage fish. And this can be linked on our aquarium websites where somebody fills out their name, email address, and zip code, and a letter is automatically generated to their representatives. Next slide. And then guest engagement. So ACP has jointly developed a customizable public service announcement with Mystic Aquarium really produced it, the script. We've shared ideas for guest engagement activities and supporting materials. I didn't include all of that information in this PowerPoint just because of time, but we can talk about a couple of them. And then a comment card template with a sample script and instructions. So this is very similar to what the Ocean Project Fishery engagement was before, with the signing the comment card, and that's a photo of, I think, the Florida Aquarium with the tabling event and somewhere where people can sign a card to Congress. So a couple ideas for guest engagement. So Mystic Aquarium, I don't know if anyone from Mystic Aquarium is on, but they do this great origami project where they have children make little origami fish and they're turning that into an art installation. The New York Aquarium had a similar Forage Fish campaign a few years ago for a local regional fishery management council. And they actually did small poems for small fish and had kids write haikus, which is really cute. So there's so many different ideas that you can come up with and personalize. And the guide that the Ocean Project really gives all the meat and the best practices and how to engage your visitors with these cool different ideas. So I don't know if this will play, but this is the Forage Fish PSA that Mystic Aquarium has played before their sea lion show, and that we are sharing with ACP aquariums who can customize this for their own aquariums. And hopefully it can play. It didn't play when I gave a presentation. There we go. Oh, yeah, it might be.
The oceans holds a tremendous diversity of creatures, big and small. Some small fish, known as forage fish, play a big role in maintaining healthy ocean ecosystems.
Forage fish serve an important ecological role, linking the bottom of the food chain, plankton, to higher trophic level predators.
Ocean wildlife depend on forage fish for their very survival.
Forage fish are an important food source for a wide diversity of marine animals, including whales and dolphins, seabirds, sharks, and fish. Many are of recreational and commercial importance.
While some species of
Oops. Sorry.
the forage fish are being managed well, others could use some help. That's where the Forage Fish Conservation Act comes in.
The Forage Fish Conservation Act will provide a comprehensive approach to management of these species.
If you agree, let your representatives know by signing a comment card before you leave the aquarium. Together, we can ensure that we have a healthy ocean for generations to come.
Great, thank you. And then I think I have one more slide to wrap things up. Oh, and here is an example of the comment card. It can be personalized for each aquarium. Okay, final.
Oh, there's it.
Oh, there's some. Okay, I think I already talked about that. My slides might have been. So those are that's the aquarium action. Like I said, the joint aquarium sign-on letter, and then congressional delegation outreach. Next slide. Oh, here we go. Great. So I think, Bill, do you want to wrap this up, this final slide? So if your institution wants to sign the letter, which Tom and Bill will circulate, I think our deadline is March 20th. And please let me know if you are currently not an ACP member and you are interested in using the Forage Fish campaign assets. Please contact Bill. Normally, because ACP is a paid membership, we don't have them open source. We're trying to figure out how we can best share with other organizations that are interested, because of course we want to have as much collective impact as possible. So we're doing this on a case-by-case basis. So if you're really interested in using any of these assets, please reach out to Bill and we can figure something out. So thank you so much, Tom and Douglas and Bill, for letting me share this information today.
Yeah, so let me just add, these letters, it's a very simple thing to do, but if you're a congressional office and you get a letter like this, the first thing you do is you look for if your zoo or an aquarium has signed on to it, because then that shows up in the briefing memos that you're going to do for your boss, which is going to determine how they're going to vote on it. So it may seem little and not a big thing, but it really can. Maybe that's the theme today: little actions, big impacts. the second thing I just want to say, I always like to let people know cautionary tales of where there could be blowback on something like this. I don't think there's a lot on this one, but forage fish are used to make various animal feeds, fertilizers. There's some commercial applications on it. If you get funding or have a donor who's, part of that industry, they're potentially going to wonder why you're signing it. I think this is a very explainable issue. I don't see a lot of danger in it, but I think that's the one thing you may want to cross T's and dot I's on if you have a concern about it. So again, I promised these are how you can find myself and Kim and Douglas. I'll leave it up here for a second and you can take a screenshot of it. Or as I said, next week, this will be posted by early next week in a PDF form on the Ocean Project's website. So that is the conclusion. We can stick around for a few minutes if there are any questions or comments. And just want to remind everybody that our next webinar will be April 3rd, same time, same place, on the 30 for 30 campaign for nature. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and hope you have a great weekend.